We begin with the breaking news and a question or two. What is the real goal here? To stop a president the people just elected? To force him to fight a case at age 83 after his presidency? Judge Juan Merchan has just paused all deadlines associated with President-elect Donald Trump's New York criminal conviction. This move takes Trump's scheduled November 26th sentencing off the table. And the timing is whether to consider the effect of Trump's election as president on the conviction against him. I'm Harris Faulkner, and you are in the Faulkner Focus. The judge pushed back his own self-imposed deadline on whether to toss out the verdict after the U.S. Supreme Court's decision, which gives presidents broad immunity from criminal prosecution. That ruling is now expected on November 19th. So we have another delay, and we're going to wait to see what this judge does with that, even though the U.S. Supreme Court has weighed in. Trump's team called to freeze and ultimately throw out the entire case so he can focus on his second term as president. Again, what is the goal here? Is it to try to stop that from happening? The people have decided. A jury convicted Trump earlier this year of all 34 felony accounts of falsifying business records related to payments to an adult film worker, Stormy Daniels. And Jonathan Turley, constitutional law attorney, Fox News contributor, Anthony McCarthy, former assistant U.S. attorney and Fox News contributor, Carrie Urban, Fox News legal editor, and Leo Terrell, Fox News contributor and attorney, are all here with me now to break this down. So, Jonathan, I will start with you and my two questions. What truly could be the goal here? What does this accomplish? And really, can you subvert the people's will, or do you think they'll push it off till he's 83 and out of office?
Well, you know, a couple of years ago, I said this election would be the largest jury decision in history, and it was. They rendered a verdict, and they rejected lawfare. And the Manhattan case is really one of the most prominent examples of lawfare. It was a ridiculous case that should not have been brought. Now, the Trump team did succeed in getting this delay. What they don't want is an indefinite status. They don't want this just to be lingering. They want to be able to get to a position where they can appeal. Keep in mind, they've never been able to get a full review of what happened at the trial. You know, this trial is riddled with reversible error, in my view. I was shocked in that courtroom watching some of these rulings, which made no sense to me. So they will be arguing in the next week that it's time for the judge to recognize reality and to dismiss this case. That would go against his pattern of ruling in the past. So, you know, Leo, I want to ask you about the certain cases that Trump faced in recent months and why this one in particular, and Jonathan just laid out the importance of it, and certainly politically, but why this one in particular they couldn't do something with along the way. And I know that the U.S. Supreme Court weighed in, but we saw cases falling apart. What makes this one so stubborn?
The state case. This is the state case where they had already in process a trial going on, and the convictions or the sentencing that is going to take place, but the conviction of 34 charges against Trump. And what's happening right now, Harris, is you have a judge acting like a politician instead of a judge. I mean, let's look at what is actually happening here. Official acts by the president are inadmissible per se. That is justification for dismissal. No one on this panel can sit here and tell anyone the impact of that inadmissible evidence on the jury. The judge should dismiss his case, but he won't. He's acting as a politician today instead of a judge. And what the Trump team has to do is insist that this case is resolved, taking no type of substitution like a pardon or some type of dismissal. President Trump's team needs to get a complete vindication because he's innocent of the charge. I still don't know what the underlying charge is.
So, Carrie, I've heard you say in particular about other cases, but certainly this one with a porn sex film worker in the middle of it all, Stormy Daniels, that some of this was put on to dirty up President Trump going into another election period. Can you talk about that a little bit and how this judge might look at kind of all of the salaciousness that we saw along the way?
Oh, for sure. I think in large part, this case was driven by Matthew Colangelo. That's the man who left DOJ, top spot at DOJ, to go assist Alvin Bragg in this case. I think they drove this case because they wanted the talking point of a convicted felon. And of course, the problem with all of that is in order for them to have made these so-called, misdemeanors felonies, they had to say that he was trying to cover up something else. The problem is we never learned what those something else's were. He didn't know. We don't know because the judge made a decision that the jury didn't have to tell us, which was crazy. So I have to say this, though, about what happened just now in the last hour. I'm actually not surprised. Donald Trump's legal team just asked Bragg's office a couple of days ago to pause the proceedings in light of the fact that he became president of the United States. So this is separate from the immunity question. So all that happened today was Judge Merchan said, okay, to the Bragg's office, give me your perspective on whether Donald Trump becoming president changes anything about this case. Because new constitutional questions are raised, because you have to remember the Department of Justice has a policy that says you can't indict, prosecute a sitting president. That's not been tested in the states, but in the spirit of that policy, in the spirit of the way we do justice in America, it is quite possible that Bragg's office submits a perspective along those lines to Judge Merchan next week.
So, Andy, if somebody were going to hire you to defend them and it were Donald Trump at this point, what advice would you give him as an attorney going forward now?
Well, I would do pretty much what they're doing. I'm not a Judge Merchan fan by any means, but I think all he did today was what the Trump team jointly asked him to do with the district attorney's office, which is give a 1-week delay. I think there's a couple of things going on here. I know that it's a hyper-technical legal point, and the rhetorical thing is more fun, but Trump actually is not a convicted felon. And I think what he wants, because that doesn't happen until judgment gets entered when he gets sentenced. Trump doesn't want to be sentenced. He doesn't want to be a convicted felon. So I agree with Jonathan that he'd like to get a clean sweep, and the best way it seems to get that would be on appeal. But he's not going to get to appeal unless he gets sentenced first, which he doesn't want. So what I think the Trump team is asking for is, I want you, Judge Merchan, to dismiss this case based on the Supreme Court's immunity ruling and the fact that Bragg put in evidence that is in violation of that ruling. If you're not willing to do that, I want the proceedings stayed. So I think even though he'd like to proceed to appeal and get a clean sweep, he would rather, if he could, not get sentenced in the first place and not be technically found a convicted felon. So he's hoping to get a dismissal, but he's hoping to get it from Judge Merchan.
So why is it that then during a presidential election, Democrats wanted to use the word anyway, convicted felon, or that phrase, and then suddenly it went away? I think you just answered that question because it hadn't happened yet in this particular case.
Right. I mean, politically, you can call him whatever you want. He's a convicted felon. The jury found him guilty. But as a technical legal matter, he's not a convicted felon until the judgment of conviction gets entered at sentencing. And the whole point of this proceeding today was to try to get the judge to vacate the jury verdicts on the basis of the immunity decision and other errors of the trial.
Look, making this even more critical, we have just gotten a statement in from a spokesperson on behalf of the president-elect Donald Trump. And here it is. At the request of the Manhattan DA, Judge Merchan has now stayed all previously scheduled deadlines, including sentencing in this case. The American people have re-elected President Trump with an overwhelming mandate. It is now abundantly clear that Americans want an immediate end to the weaponization of our justice system, including this case, which should never have been filed. So we can, and this is all a quote now, as President Trump said in his historic victory speech, unify our country and work together for the betterment of our nation. Jonathan, I'm going to get your response to that.
Well, I certainly agree this case should never have been brought. The case was based on, and in my view, an unprecedented application of these laws. The judge made a mess of this case with making reversible errors left and right. So I certainly agree with that. The question is whether this will weigh that heavily on the judge. The judge that I saw in that courtroom was not someone who would take a balanced approach to these questions. I did find him very balanced at the trial. The issue for the Trump administration, to build on Andy's really insightful remarks, is what's better for you. People will continue to refer to the conviction on these counts and the colloquial use of being a convicted felon are likely to continue. The idea, and Andy made an interesting suggestion, that this could be suspended for the upcoming term, but I would think that would be the worst of all options for the president
and for the country, by the way. And for the country, Jonathan, because then the question becomes, does he have to be careful in certain ways not to tick off some judge? I mean, this is a man who was under really unusual gag order rules the entire time. I mean, it really was hard to miss that across many cases. And so now you ask, if you're going to hold it till he's 83 and he's out of office, how does that impact what goes on between now and then? The people have voted. Leo, just a quick response to that, and then we'll move.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. To use this case and to hang it over Trump's head for 4 years is politics. And look, I've only been practicing law for 35 years. And I would just ask anyone to just answer this question. The inadmissible evidence of these official acts being introduced in trial, why can't the judge dismiss this case? Period. Just answer that question. I don't understand it.
Wow.
It's inadmissible evidence. It impacted the jury. Why can't he dismiss it? Why wait next week? He could have dismissed this case, Harris, weeks ago. I don't understand it.
I thank you all, Jonathan, Andy, Carrie, and Leo. Thank you so very much for being with us. November 19th, I have a feeling we'll be